GM, got an urgent update for all of you today. Markets have been moving and there are catalysts that I see nobody talking about that can move these markets much further. So on screen, I'm looking at the options expiry, which is for tomorrow. We've got 2 billion in notional value of calls and puts. That's not something you usually see on an options expiry in the first week. Typically, the big options expiries, you guys will know, are end of the month and end of quarter. But because the markets have been so volatile, there's actually a lot of interest in the market right now. And you've got key levels at 70, 72, 75. And I talked about in the Discord this exact scenario where if Bitcoin breaks down below 72K and 70K, that's where capitulation breakdowns occur. We've absolutely nailed this move this morning as we see Bitcoin going into the 60s now, breaking below those key OPEX levels. If we take a look over here, got those OPEX levels mapped out. As soon as we lost that 72K initially, we had a lovely move down, great for short trades, came up for a retest. Where does it reject? Exactly at that OPEX level. Now we broke 70, so we're at risk of a further flush coming in the markets because anyone with a call has to hedge their positions, which is a short. Anyone with a put is in the money and they're more incentivized to keep price below 70. So by the same nature, if on the New York session you see price rally up, then you can likely see a squeeze up back towards 72 to take out some shorts, where then you would expect some resistance to potentially come in. We're building a base right now, consolidation. So energy is certainly gearing up. If we cannot get above 70, then that opens up for a potential unwind into the high 60s on Bitcoin. And we're right around that 200-week EMA. We also have 500 million of open interest still built up in dollar terms. Yesterday it was 900 million. That's why I made the video about that. We actually changed the open interest to be in terms of coins. So in terms of Bitcoin, you can see this big ramp up, even in this consolidation as early as the last 2 hours or so. Lot of longs, lot of shorts have now built up, and you've got spot bidding actually, you've got perps bidding, prices rising. So 70K is now that all important level where if we can squeeze above there, I'd expect this to now accelerate and just wipe out some of those shorts. Not sure how high it goes. You'd just be watching price action wise for your market structure breaks, your signs of a reversal. Yes, we're trying to stab through that now. Obviously, if you reject at 70, then that sets up for a further unwind if that OPEX level is actually going to be holding, because there's a lot of notional value alone at 70K. You've got 62.9 million worth of puts there and small amount of calls, 4 million. So fair to say, it's an important level, 70K above and below. It's going to act as a pivot. The options expiry is tomorrow at 8 a.m. UTC. So closer we get to there, the more these levels become relevant. And as mentioned, all the big unwinds are going to occur below 70. That's what can really catalyze a move to 68, 67K. And Bitcoin does still need that capitulation, because this right now is not capitulation. We got a full body candle at the weekly. We're coming into the 200-week EMA before the New York session. So in a liquid market, even if this is the bottom, once you get in the New York session, liquid market, you're likely to at least have a sweep of the lows to test the bottom, if not a breakdown. So really watching this, and you really just want to see this now accelerate, because there are signs of the walls cracking in crypto. Sol is now breaking the 110 to 115 zone that I talked about, breaking 90. And I do think Sol has to go back to some of these previous accumulation levels over here. So I'd be looking for proper capitulations in crypto to be met with Sol going back to the 60s, back to this green zone over here. And if that failed, then potentially even back to the bear market zone. And you'd just be looking for the exact same thing at the bear market to signal price is bottoming. Bottoms take time, but they typically begin with a bang. Bull markets, they typically end with a bang. And the bear markets, they really are typically catalyzed by one of these high volume sell weeks, like you see over here when FTX collapsed. You had that extreme high volume week, price then went sideways and then broke out. That was your telltale sign. And currently we're in the down phase of that, so it's still too early. And if you see something like Ethereum, on the other hand, ETH is really toying around this 2K level where I think real capitulation occurs as soon as it loses 2K. Anyone betting on 2K holding will have to surely unwind if we do start trading back into some of these previous areas of reaccumulation on ETH. So I think you're going to have to see a 1 in front of Ethereum before the crypto market can really bottom out. And then potentially it goes into that horrible dead period where everyone checks out the markets because they were too over leveraged here, too over leveraged here, too over leveraged here, when the market was literally telling you it's rejecting the all-time high. It's then breaking your basic market structure, breaking further market structure, breaking further market structure. So you're at the point where markets are now taking out the worstly positioned people, the people who are extremely underwater, and they're the guys that bottom out the markets when they eventually capitulate. And if ETH's going to go to some of these levels, 1.8, 1.7, 1.6, then what you're going to see is Bitcoin equivalent is most likely also going to have another stab lower. And if you see that with high volume, then that's your sign for a potential bottom to be forming. If you then see sideways action proceed. And that can also occur from here. If we're not going to go for that high volume candle and you see it from later on, then potentially it happens just from lower on. Predicting the bottom's pointless. We've got to react to the markets to see what is going on. And if we look at a simple volume analysis of Bitcoin, if we get volume on here, we can see that this week is shaping up to be a high volume week. So you now just need to see that stab lower, which leads to a big lower wick and shows some kind of impulse and some kind of demand. Because at the moment, the daily's not showing that. It's just stair-stepping down. We need one of these capitulation wicks. And that's not even necessarily going to be a bottom, but it at least leads to a local bottom, as I described on yesterday's video in detail. So that's what I'll be watching on Bitcoin and ETH and Sol, respectively, to really get a gauge for where this market can go. And mostly what I'm looking at are these OPEX levels for trading today. So caught some great shorts in the school, as you guys can see from the analysis. If you guys want market updates live while Bitcoin's so volatile, if you want to be knowing exactly where the next likely move is, as we posted here, breaking below 72 and 70 would lead to that capitulation unwind. As we've been saying for weeks now, Bitcoin most likely does need to go into the 60s to capitulate, people. Just message me, first link in the description. We'll see if the school is a fit for you. But we've been absolutely killing it in shorts. Next shorts really set up if we get back below and accept below this 70K level, especially in the New York session. So just going to be watching for trend respect on all of these bands as I've been discussing. I know a bunch of you have been killing it, taking shorts off these 1 hour bands in the school. You've been tagging me with all your gains. Absolutely G to see. We got the daily open over here, which has been pretty much down only since the daily opened out. And the 1 hour bands have so far been acting as your trend resistance. Anytime we bounce, sellers are met at those H1 bands. And on the higher time frame trend, so this is your fast trend on the 1 hour. On the higher time frame, it's been the 4 hour trend. So these are the 12 and 21 EMA bands. Very simple. Got your 4 hour trend, slightly front round there, but still being respected to the downside, as you can see on all of these taps. So I'd be watching the 1 hour trend first of all. If we bounce into there, does that reject, especially if it's going to be around that 72K OPEX level? That can be a potential area to set up some shorts for me. But of course, price action dependent on my systems at the time. Also, if we do need to go for a bit larger of a bounce, then potentially we need to head back to that daily open, which is over here, equivalent. But also, if you look at the screen on the right, that would be your 4-hour bands. If we need to go as high as that, then I'd be watching a rejection at that daily open for potential short setups as well. And losing 72k is going to be your trigger for further downside. And that's going to tell you that your shorts are right. And the same in this scenario, losing 70k is what tells you your shorts are right. So that's what I'd be looking for. Bit of patience now, since we made a lot of gains on the shorts. Got to be patient here now for the next move. We're losing 70k, which is, all else being equal, great for further downside, but it's pre-New York session, which is what I don't like about it right now. Because yes, potentially we reject here and do continue on downwards, and I think closes below the 2021 all-time high. You'll probably see some chop around it, but if you see general weakness on something like the 15-minute bands and we can't even get up to those 1-hour bands and the New York session begins and you see price failing to get above even the 15-minute bands and then it loses the 2021 all-time high, I'll be looking for further downside and some of that OPEX catalyst to kind of play out and really carry positioning downwards, since all of those puts, as I said, would be in the money and they're incentivized to keep Bitcoin below 70, push it down as low as they can as we get to Friday 8 a.m. UTC. And if we're seeing ETH, as I said, capitulate, SOL capitulate, then that's what would then trigger me to start closing out some of the shorts if I do get a setup. So watching that as your low time frame scenario on the 15-minute, if we can't reclaim 70k here, already rejecting here as we can see. And data-wise, open interest is still elevated, so there's still room for a really big volatile swing either way, and it's setting up for downside. Let's be perfectly clear here, because every bounce is getting sold into. Spot sellers just arriving every single time price bounces. So it seems that the longs are the ones offside rather than the shorts. And the shorts are actually right here in the market. So be watching that 2021 all-time high level. Anyone betting on that, betting on the 200-week holding, I think they can just get themselves tested. And the weekly candle, funnily enough, can end up closing back above at 200-week EMA. But low time frame in the trading week, you can see price go below it. Then that's maybe when you actually get your bounce. You close for the week above the 200. And then overall, that can set up your high capitulation zone where you got ETH capitulating and SOL capitulation and set up a local bottom for a number of days or weeks to come. But still, long way to go for that. Markets going down until they stop going down, until they at least have a high volume capitulation candle and / or reclaim something like the 1-hour bands for starters. So this is what bulls need to do to take control from the bears, is to first of all flip H1 bands, then reclaim them so they flip green, and better yet, flip the H4 bands, which are firmly red, firmly acting as resistance. So you expect that to continue until price can get above them and above some of the market structure. And the market structure currently is sitting all the way at 76.6k. So a lot of work for bulls to do if they do want to actually reclaim some of these levels and set up a potential reversal. At the moment, bears are in control, especially while we're below 70, 72 daily open. So if bulls are going to have a stab today and this is going to set up for a short squeeze, be watching that daily open. If you flip above that, then be watching these 4-hour bands. Do they actually end up flipping green? That can flip the trend to the upside being more likely. Or do we start rejecting at this market structure level here? So this is the ultimate level, around 76.6k to flip above to confirm that market structure break. So that's Bitcoin, that's Ethereum, that is Solana. Look at the wider markets, what we're seeing. Well, Bitcoin just continues that weakness from last week. We couldn't get anywhere near Friday's low, which was the signal in itself that crypto is still relatively weak. Stocks, after rallying up, they then mean reverted the entire rally, and they're now trading below both Thursday and Friday's levels from last week. So the deleveraging event from gold and silver, which fed its way through to risk assets like stocks and Bitcoin, is still in control. And we are now trading lower than where we were at last week during gold's liquidation events. That is a show of weakness for risk assets. And you have to accept that and be objective and identify that, because downside is more likely. Again, until you start flipping something like the 4-hour bands and the 4-hour market structure. Bitcoin's clearly the relatively weakest out of all of them. Gold is actually having a bit of a mean reversion bounce just to fill in some of the move. Silver much weaker, and I think gold just has better high time frame structure. That's the reasoning for that. We'll do a deep dive later on this evening for a monthly outlook, so stay tuned for that. That will be uploaded for a super high time frame analysis. But overall, it's very clear to see that gold moved up much more sustainably, whereas silver moved up in much more of a parabolic banana fashion. So it's no surprise to see silver a lot weaker than gold, because gold still has these weekly 10 and 20 EMA band support over here, which it's been holding for years now. So that liquidation wick just came into those bands. Whereas silver, it's coming into the bands now, but it had extended so far above the bands that you're now having a red week on silver while gold is actually green, just because of how overextended it was. And the next real support on silver is so low down. If we lose this support, it's at 54, whereas the next support on gold is actually 4.4K, 10% below current price. So you built a better cause and effect on gold, which is why it's holding up much better. So it's really interesting a market we're in right now. We've never seen what happens to risk assets when gold and silver and this overall metals kind of super cycle, if you like, starts to unwind. We've now seen it leads to risk assets also having an unwind, and leads to the dollar actually having the best time. So if we look at the dollar, the flight away from gold has found inflows into the dollar. Risk assets haven't liked this, but this is what happens. When you get into your capitulation, it always gets worse before it gets better. Flush out all the weak hands. That's what you got to do. And eventually that's going to set up the opportunities, because long term, Bitcoin is going up and to the right. That's my belief. I believe it goes to 250, 300, 500K. It's going to absolutely rip faces, and ripping rallies will return, but they're not here right now. And the volatility is to the short side. That's why we learn how to trade. We split our long-term portfolio from our short-term trading portfolio, and we look to compound and make additional profits through the trading portfolio. So seeing 70K reject right now. If we do start losing that 200 week and 2021 all-time high, we are coming into the New York session in 15 minutes. So watching that chop scenario to see if we have a close below it, fail to really get above, and you see these bands continue to hold, I think that can set up for what can be a short trade unwind in the New York session. Get above 70 though, then we're looking at the 1-hour bands and 4-hour bands as mentioned. So those are the trade setups I'm looking at for today. That's the analysis, monthly outlook later on. If you enjoyed this video, help me out. Let's get to 1.5K subscribers. I've been smashing out this content for you guys, nailing the market. So show me some love, please, guys. It takes one button click. That's all I ask. I think I should have more subs than I do right now. I'm not shitting you guys a bunch of crap. I'm giving you guys the real deal. So hope to see you guys supporting the channel. Turn that bell on. Drop a like and comment if you did enjoy. I'll see you in the monthly outlook tonight. GM.